Good evening and praise the Lord, everybody. Amen. On behalf of our security ministry and our civic ministry, we welcome you to tonight's presentation. And as we always say at Mount Olive, we are happy, glad that you are here with us on tonight. Amen. Let us bow for a word of prayer. Our Father and our God, we acknowledge that you are good and that you are God all by yourself. We thank you for all of our guests tonight. We thank you for the presentation. We thank you for all the information that we will receive. We pray that we will be good stewards of that information, that we will put it to good use in our community. Again, God, we give you all the praise, all the honor, and the glory for blessing us to be here on tonight. For us in the name of Jesus that we do pray. Amen. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor. If you've come to Mount Olive, you know that the doors are always open. And I just want to thank the pastor for once again opening the doors tonight for us all to be here. Prayerfully, we will all be blessed by being here. I know we've gotten an esteemed panel gathered here tonight for us, and so we're extremely happy to see all these faces out here. Last month, we had Congresswoman Jennifer McClellan here. And at the end of her speech, she was asked the question, what can we do to prepare for the next 3 years? And her response was, know your rights. So appropriate enough, we had already had this plan, and God had ordained us to have this, in my opinion. And so that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So on behalf of the security ministry and in collaboration with the civic ministry, we thank you all for being here tonight, and I know you're going to be blessed. I'm absolutely positive that God had led you here for a reason tonight, and so thank you for being here. And because of your obedience, I'm quite sure everybody's going to be blessed. I'd be remiss if I didn't thank a few people for helping to put this together tonight. Internally, I want to thank Deacon Gary Jennings. He had a shared vision from the onset, and so I want to thank him for his support. I want to thank Deacon Tiggle for, as usual, putting the logistics together for this. Sister Jeannie Robinson for her support, Sister Tanya Cuff for her support and advice, and a special thanks to Darryl Timberlake. He's in here somewhere. I know I worried him to death during this whole process, so Darryl, thank you so very much. Externally, I want to thank W.C. Butler with Summit Media Radio. He had us on Charlemagne, the Charlemagne Morning Show for the past 3 weeks, and he blasted the airwaves, so thank him for what he's done. I want to thank Sister Gina Scott with St. Peter Baptist Church. She's with her social justice ministry. She put this in their bulletin, and they also reached out to the youth at their church, so I want to thank her. Brother Francis, who is here, retired police officer from Raccoon County. He's their security lead over there, and Dr. McCloyd, I don't think is here for passing the word through St. Peter, so we want to thank you for that. Social media people, Tony Michelle Fitzgerald, I want to thank you for pushing it out there, and the countless other people who pushed it out there on social media. So even if they're not here, I hope and pray that they're watching us online, and that they'll get something from this as well. And inspiration, I want to thank Sharice and Ralphie for their inspiration. So we want to make sure that we get to the point and have enough time for Q&A at the end, because that's the most important part. So I'm glad and grateful to introduce our panelists for the evening. And let me say this before we get started. Thank you all for your service to the community and all that you do, and you're out in evenings and nights, and I look on your social media pages, you guys are all over the place, so thank you for that. And also thank your family members, your wives, your spouses, for the sacrifice that they make as well for the community. So thank you for all that you do for us. Shannon Taylor, who was our Commonwealth's attorney, initially was not going to be here, but she changed some things around her schedule. She's running a little late, which we knew. She changed some things around her schedule to make sure that she's here this evening. But we've got, and I shouldn't say but, also we've got our assistant Commonwealth's attorneys for Henrico County, Zachariah Hunley, who's sitting on the end over there, and Corey Nicholson, who's on the end over there as well. Thank you all for being here. I've talked to them 3 or 4 times over the last couple months, and every single conversation was cordial and helpful, so thank you, Commonwealth's Attorney's Office, for being here. I think everybody in this room knows that Colonel English is here. He's the first African-American chief of police for Henrico County, and so we're proud as we can be to have him in here with us. And initially, when I sent out the email to his office, I'm figuring, okay, we'll get a major or a lieutenant or a captain, but the next morning he emailed back and said he would be glad to be here. So thank you, sir, and thank you for protecting us and all you do for us. Then also we have Deanna Gibson, who is here from the Henrico County NAACP. She's the vice president. Her, along with Ray Beasley, who's sitting in the audience right there, sort of spearheaded this thing. I know who to call initially. I called Ray Beasley and I called Deanna, and they sort of got this whole thing rolling. So thank you for being here and all that you do. Also, and before I introduce this person, I do want to say this. A week out of Veterans Day, Supervisor Miss Dee Dee Roundtree, thank you for your service. I understand you served in the military as well as your mother, so thank you for your service to our nation and to our county. So we've got Supervisor of the 3-Chop District, Misty Roundtree. Miss Roundtree's not here exactly in a supervisor role. She's here more in a role of what she does during the day, which is a lawyer. She represents the indigent, the less fortunate in Henrico County, and specifically women and children. And I've seen her at work. She's a tenacious fighter, and so I'm glad and happy that she's here with us as well. And next to the chief is Miriam Arrington Fisher. She was gracious enough 2.5 weeks ago when I called her to answer the call and to be here. She is one of the premier immigration lawyers in the state of Virginia, and she is here specifically to talk about ICE. Specifically to talk about ICE. She's a fighter, she's well known, and so we're happy as we can be to have you here. So this is how it's going to go. First of all, we're not going to take an adversarial approach to this. We're going to take a collaborative approach to this, and that's why they're all here. So we thank him once again for being here. We are going to start with the chief. Chief English will come up and he'll talk about how to handle traffic stops, how to handle being approached on foot. Then we will go to Supervisor Roundtree, who will talk to us about understanding your rights in the system. Lord forbid you are arrested, or a family member or a son or a daughter. She will speak to that. And then we will talk about, we will have Miriam Arrington Fisher come up, and she's going to talk about ICE. Then what we'll have happen is the Commonwealth's attorney will come up, and they'll sort of tie everything together for us, okay? And then at the end, last but not least, certainly, Deanna Gibson will come up and talk about voting rights. Right now, we're currently in an environment where they're being assailed, and we have got to talk about voting rights. So that's how it's going to go. And then at the end, prayerfully, we'll have enough time for Q&A. That's what they really like doing, and that's what we want to make sure we have enough time to do, okay? So please hold your questions until the end, until we get to that. So I need to sit down, Chief. It's your opportunity. Thank you, sir.
Well, good evening, and I would like to say it is a blessing to be here before you, and it's really delightful to see so many people here. I honestly, when he said that, I responded very quickly. This is something I really love to do. I wish we did more of this with larger crowds, because I do think it's important. As Jennifer McCullough told you all, know your rights. I want everybody to know what their rights are. Believe me, it's not like we're trying to hide anything. We want you to know what your rights are. So I'm going to be before you just to go a little bit of overview of, what you do on a traffic stop and what you do if you have an encounter with the police on foot. And I want to just give you a kind of a quick overview of what and how that should go, and some of our protocols that you should expect from us at Henrico County. So as you all know, Henrico officers, all of them have body-worn cameras. So anytime there's a traffic stop, the body-worn camera should be on. And our protocols are that you turn your body-worn camera on before you go up to the car. Anytime we get a call for service, our officers are required to turn their body-worn camera on. The reason being is I want them to turn it on while they're en route to the call and not while they get there, because by the time you get there, something could happen immediately, and the last thing I want you worried about is turning on the camera. So turn it on before you get to the call. So that's our protocol. So once you get stopped, and majority of you all, that is probably how you're going to encounter most police officers on a traffic stop. We don't always, abide by all traffic laws. I mean, let's just be honest with you. If you get stopped, an officer should go up to you, should introduce themselves, tell you why you got stopped, and they're going to ask you for your license. Sometimes they ask you for registration, not all the time, not really necessary, but they're going to ask you for your license. It's important for you all to make sure get the mindset of how the officer's thinking. So one of the things we go up to the car, one of the things we want to be able to see is your hands. The one thing that can hurt us is your hands. Not necessarily because you're going to punch us, but because you could grab something. We don't know you from anybody else. So we always like to see the individual's hands. So when people tell you, show your hands, because your hands on the steering wheel, or have them out, you can see them, that is important to us. It gives us a little bit more comfort, because you don't realize how many guns we take out of cars on a regular basis. It just happens so often. So seeing your hands is important. And then the other thing is, when you're getting stopped, as you can see the officer behind you getting stopped, don't start reaching. Like some people start reaching for their license in their glove box. We don't know what you're reaching for. So I would just say, just stay calm until the officer and follows the officer's direction when they make the stop. And they'll tell you, let me see your license. They may ask you if you have any guns in the car. Some people, I'll tell you, since citizens have gotten offended because they asked that question, sometimes that's a standard question for officers, because we're just trying to make sure that everybody's going to be safe. And so they'll ask that question. And then sometimes we can also tell whether you got a concealed weapons permit by running your information. And so going to the car, we may ask you, do you have your weapon on you? So those are things that could happen. So again, follow the officer's instruction. I can tell you sometimes you're not going to agree with the officer said. Ma'am, you just ran the red light. No, I didn't run the red light. Well, I can tell you on the side of the road is not the time to argue about whether you were right or wrong, because you're never going to win that argument. Now, I can tell you that if you feel like you're wrong, you're going to have your day in court. If you feel like you were mistreated, that's the time you can make a complaint. You don't know how many times I get people to call me and say, Chief, I was not treated right. I'm not going to ignore that. I can tell people, I just had a lady call me last week that was upset about getting a ticket. I told her, I said, look, I can only deal with the behavior. I can't deal with the ticket. So if you was mistreated, I'm going to look at the body-worn camera video, and I can tell you, I'll get back with you and tell you whether I see anything wrong with the stop or not. I will always take a look at body-worn camera video, and I'm going to be the first to tell you, we don't always get it right. We do not always get it right. I'm not going to tell you we're perfect. But I can tell you that if my officers are doing something improper or treating people the wrong way, they'll feel the consequences. I mean, we don't just ignore, because we want, my goal is always make sure we're treating people appropriately. And we all want to make sure we treat people with dignity and respect. And if my officers are not following that, then I got to make sure I deal with them on the back end. So those are really the basic steps on a traffic stop. If you feel like you're mistreated, you can file a complaint. You can call a supervisor. There's things you can do in order to do that, but don't get into an argument with the officer on the side of the road whether you're right or wrong, because you're never going to win that. If you're approached on foot, normally there has to be, an officer can have a consensual encounter. Like I could come up to you and say, hey, sir, do you mind if I talk to you? Well, if I don't have any reasonable suspicion to stop you, you can say, no, I don't want to talk to you, and you keep walking. That's your right. But if there is a crime that has been taking place in the area, we have reasonable suspicion to believe you may be involved. We may be able to stop you, may be able to detain you, may be able to ask you questions. You don't have to answer everything that we ask you. We ask you your name, maybe your name, address, do you live here, those type of questions. But you don't have to implicate yourself in anything. I'm just telling you, these are your rights that you have. But you may get stopped. Again, as I talk about getting stopped on foot, hands are important. We want to make sure we see your hands. So a lot of times you'll see people stand there, they have their hands in their pocket. That's scary for us, people with their hands in their pocket. I'm just being honest, that's scary for us. So we like to see your hands, like to keep them out where we can see them. And then your demeanor and our demeanor is going to dictate how that's going to go. I want our officers to make sure we're, like I said, treating people with dignity and respect. Our voices should be calm. We're trying to calm the situation down, but also we expect that from citizens. Now, do we always get that? No. But that doesn't mean, and I tell my officers this all the time, just because somebody is treating us bad doesn't mean you get to elevate to their level. That is not what we're doing. We're here to de-escalate the situation. And so it's important for us to make sure we remain calm. So those are the type of the things that when you get stopped or you get approached by an officer, these are the things you need to really be aware of. Things that are going to keep you safe, things that are going to keep officers safe. We just want to make sure that everybody gets to go home safely. We can argue about whether you're right or wrong at the end. You can complain at the end. But in the middle of what's going on is not the time. And honestly, I get a lot of people that I know personally. They would call me, ask me about a situation. They would call me, ask me to look at a body camera video. I do not ignore them. There are times I'll tell people to come in and say, hey, let's sit down and look at it. Tell me why you felt this way. We'll sit down and look at the body camera video together. I just want them to explain, because there are some times when I look at it and I say, man, we were wrong on that one. And if we're wrong, I'm going to call you and tell you we were wrong. But if we were not wrong, I'm going to call you and say, hey, that's not what I saw in the video. Let's come in and you take a look at it and tell me why you felt the way you felt. I just try to be as transparent as I can when it comes to those situations, because I know, I don't want friction between us and citizens. And so anything we can do to kind of squash that barrier, I think is important to me. So those are just kind of the overall view of how the interaction should go between police and citizens in those situations.
Good evening. First of all, I'm delighted to be here as Chief. I echo what Chief said. I really, really enjoy the opportunities that I have to talk with community members because with both of the hats that I wear, both as a defense attorney and serving on the board, it really is about the people and representing people and trying to make sure that people are heard and have a fair way of living their lives, and this is one of the ways that we get to do that. So thank you all for being here. When I was given the task at hand of Know Your Rights, it's such a broad subject, and I could go on forever, but they gave me 15 minutes, so I'm going to try to stay to that. It brought me to, and I'm going to tell a little story first, and I'm going to try not to. It gets me emotional when I think about it, because I'm going to tell you about all of these rights that you have. But I recognize that that's not how it always plays out when we're living real life, right? So several years ago, my oldest son, he's 25 now, he was attending college in Harrisonburg, and he had come home for the weekend, several days, and had just that very day gone back to Harrisonburg. And so I was at my office, and all of a sudden he called. And if you have, kids of that age, first of all, when they call, you're like, what's going on? Because normally they shoot you a text, right? So immediately when I see the call coming in, I'm like, something's not right. So I answer, and you can feel when your child is on the other line and something is not right. And his words were, Mom, I need your help with something. But the way he said it wasn't a regular, I need your help with something. It was like a, Mom, I need your help with something. And I felt my stomach drop immediately because I knew that it was something big. And he went on to explain that the police were at his apartment, and they needed to verify something about a gun. So backstory, my son was living in a how they do in college towns, and so he was assigned 3 roommates. It wasn't on campus, it was off campus, but it was designed for college students, and so you pay for your room, and they assign you 3 other roommates. And so he had 3 roommates that he didn't know very well, and had been living there for a while, and I didn't really know much about these roommates either. But when he went to college, one of the things that he did was he purchased a handgun. And I had very mixed emotions about that. I'm former military, so I'm certainly familiar with handguns. I grew up in Fayetteville, North Carolina, so if anybody is familiar with Vietnam, we know a little something about handguns. And so it wasn't that I had, an opposition necessarily to handguns itself, but I knew that that would increase risk to him on a variety of levels: police interactions, peer interactions, having it in his car, accidental shootings. Like, I was afraid for my baby, but he's grown. And, he had the courtesy to talk with me about it. I expressed my feelings, and he said, thank you, Mom, I respect your opinion, but I'm gonna go ahead and get one. And he said, because living in Harrisonburg was different for him than living in Richmond, and he encountered a lot of racism in Harrisonburg. He had been confronted at campus events, and he felt like he needed it for protection. So in any event, so he had this handgun, and it was his normal practice when he came home that he would bring it home with him. And so he had done so that particular weekend. So anyway, he says that he had just gotten home, and he was like, Mom, I'm in the living room, I was on the game, and all of a sudden I see lights outside, and bop, 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 doors being knocked on, rapped on, and he called them SWAT. I don't know that they were SWAT, but it was police, and they came in and busted through the door. So I didn't know any of this at the time, right? So he's just on the phone, and he's like, Mom, the police are here, and they need you to verify that I had my gun with me this weekend when I came home. So I'm like, what? I'm not expecting this at all. I'm like, what are you talking about? And he said, the police are here, because you lost me at the police are here. The police are here. I said, well, let me speak to an officer. And so he puts an officer on the phone, and very polite. I could tell he sounded young, and he said, Ma'am, I'm sorry, I don't want to distress you, but your son told me that you were a lawyer, and so I understand that this, might be, you might be caught off guard here, but I really just need to know and confirm that he had his gun with him this weekend. He said he came home for the weekend and he had his gun. And I'm like, but why? What is going on? And he said, well, we got a report that one of his roommates was involved in a string of robberies, and so we're executing a search warrant, and we're searching all of the rooms, and we found a firearm in your son's room. And I just need to verify that this was not the firearm that was used in any of these robberies. One of them occurred over the weekend, and I need to confirm that he had his firearm with him in Richmond with you. And in my mind, in my lawyer mind, I'm thinking, my son told you all of this? Like, what? So my son gave a statement, and he's like, do you feel comfortable talking to me? And I said, I should not be talking to you. My son should not be talking to you. We should not be giving any statements to you right now, because I know that as a lawyer. But I'm Mom in this moment, right? And so he said, and I told him, I literally said that to him. I was like, I should not be talking to you. My son should not be talking to you. And he said, I understand you, but this will help me to let your son go. I just need to know this. Otherwise, we're going to have to take him in. We're going to have to process the gun. We're going to have to do all of these things. But if you tell me this, I will take you at your word, and I will let him go. And I wrestled with that thing mightily, because I didn't know what to do. And I'm a grown woman with, degrees and experience and all of this. And in that moment, I chose the mom hat. And I said, I can vouch for him, and I can assure you that he had his firearm with. And I knew this for a fact, because he had to go, he had to cross state lines to buy a vehicle. And I remember having a conversation with him that you can't take that with you across state lines. You can't go to Maryland with it. And we had that back and forth. So I knew for a fact he had it with him. And so I went ahead and spoke with him, and they did let him go later on. And so it was only afterwards, talking to my son, that I got the backstory about the roommate and what had happened. And he said, the police bust through the door, they grabbed all of them. He's on the game. The roommate wasn't there. The wrongdoer of all people wasn't there. But the other people, his other roommates were there, and they got him, and he described it that they handcuffed him and they put his hands behind his back and they laid him on the ground, on the concrete outside, and people, you know, it was an apartment complex, and people were recording it, and my heart just broke into 1,000 pieces thinking about my baby laying on a pavement while people were recording it for something he hadn't done, and the helplessness that I felt, because I was 2 hours away, and I'm hearing about it after the fact. But I tell that story because I recognize that I can stand up here and tell you all day long what your rights are, what the Constitution says, what due process means, and all of that. But when you're in that moment, you just want to be safe, you want your family members to be safe, and what I tell you may or may not make a whole lot of difference in that moment. So give yourself grace if that happens. But we do need to know what our rights are. There's a book called You Have the Right to Remain Innocent. Has anybody in here heard of that book? You Have the Right to Remain Innocent. I think James Duane. Anyway, if you Google it, You Have the Right to Remain Innocent. It's a really compelling book, and he comes from a law enforcement background, I believe, and he talks in this book about how law enforcement officers, many of them, tell their own children, do not talk to police, you know, voluntarily. And, you know, I give this example when I work with juveniles a lot, and juveniles are always, you know, on the one hand, representing juveniles is really hard because you're dealing with kids, and the challenges of dealing with children. On the other hand, from a legal defense standpoint, sometimes it's easier because the evidence is often so overwhelming because they've just blah, blah, blah. They've just talked so much by the time it gets to me. But I always tell them, you have the right to remain silent, and you should exercise that right to remain silent. And then I'll say to them, question, what did you have for dinner 2 nights ago? Right? And they'll think, and usually, I don't know. And I'll say, I don't know. I mean, I think I might remember, but I'm going to have to take a minute to think, okay, today is Tuesday, today's Wednesday, Monday, right? And it's going to take me a minute to think about what I had for dinner 2 nights ago. I'm not intending to lie. I'm going to try my best to come up with the right answer, but I may also get it wrong, right? And I'm certainly going to look like I'm making something up when I'm sitting there thinking, wait a minute, today's Wednesday now. You don't know how easy it is to mistakenly get caught up in a situation where you've said something that can ultimately come back to bite you until you're in that situation. And so when we talk about, you know, not voluntarily talking to police, it's not because we think police are the enemy. It's not because we think, you know, police are going to take what we say and twist it or whatever. It's because a lot of people have gotten caught up erroneously, wrongfully, accidentally, because of simple human error, human mistake, you know, it just happens. And so one of the most fundamental rights that you all have is the right to remain silent when you're asked. And Chief English said that, right? He said if a police officer stops you on the street and says, wait a minute, stop, and starts asking you questions, if there's no reasonable suspicion, and that's a term of art, a legal term, reasonable suspicion that you've done something wrong, then you are completely free to walk away and not answer those questions. But it is hard, right? Because when you haven't done something wrong, what's your automatic desire? To prove you're innocent, right? So if I'm leaving a store and somebody stops me and says, ma'am, did you pay for that? I think you didn't pay for it. My automatic response is going to be like, here's my receipt, right? I'm going to start professing my innocence. And so the similar situation happens when we are confronted by somebody in law enforcement or position of authority that we want to profess our innocence. And so it goes against human nature sometimes to exercise our right to remain silent. And I tell people all of the time, you don't have to be rude about it. You don't have to be nasty. You could very calmly say, and I've told this to my children, a proper way to say it is, officer, respectfully, I decline to answer your questions, right? You don't have to go off or whatever. Respectfully, I decline to answer your questions. And it's as simple as that. And if they have more, if they have the reasonable suspicion or something where they believe that they can take it further, then they will do so and they will let you know. And then as Chief English said, if something wrong has happened along the way, we'll fix that later. I tell the people I work with all of the time, I need you alive to challenge this down the road if that's what we're going to do, right? Get through the encounter and then we'll figure out how to address it later if there was something that was done wrong. So you absolutely have a right to remain silent. A right to have a lawyer. You have a right to have a lawyer appointed to you if you are charged with an offense for which you can receive jail time. And that could be a misdemeanor or a felony, and this applies to juveniles as well as adults. And it's based on income as far as having a court-appointed lawyer. For those of you that have young people, if you have a young person that's in the system, in Henrico County, we have a policy that any young person charged with a felony is going to get a court-appointed lawyer if they ask for it, regardless of income, and then we figure out the income portion of it first. So never sleep on your right to have a lawyer. Even if you don't think you qualify or you don't know if you can afford it, ask for one. The worst thing that can happen is they say no, and then you have to pay for one later, but you have an absolute right to have an attorney. And even if, I tell folks all the time, even if they got you on video committing a crime, who thinks you should still have a lawyer? All of y'all should raise your hands, right? You should still have a lawyer because there are so many, the range of options between what can happen, even if they've got you dead to rights committing a crime, is here to there. And having a lawyer is having, an advocate. It really is. It's having a voice to say, well, I did shoplift this, but here's the circumstance why, and here's the, what the judge needs to know. I've had to be in court myself for, civil matters or what have you, and, representing ourselves, the saying is that a person who represents themselves has a fool for a lawyer, or fool for a client, one of the two. Anyway. It is beneficial, even if you are a lawyer, to have somebody advocating for you, and that can help you navigate the process. So those two rights, the right to remain silent, the right to have a lawyer represent you, are among your most fundamental rights. What's the time check? Am I already at 15 minutes? The due process is something that is near and dear to my heart, and I talk about due process all of the time. And what that means is that in this country, in theory, in this country, there is a set of rules that is supposed to apply equally to everybody as you navigate any system, really, but obviously tonight we're talking about the criminal justice system. And that says, here's how long you have to get charged with a crime, right? Statute of limitations. Here's how long it is before, if you get charged, you have to be in front of a judge to have your case heard. Here's when you get to go in front of a judge to ask to be released on bond. Here are the rules that apply with information that you get to defend your case. Here are the guidelines that can be used to sentence you. All of those are due process rights that you have. And sometimes I find myself on the defensive, pun intended, being a defense lawyer, especially in this role as the Board of Supervisors, because I work every day with Chief English. I work every day with Shannon Taylor and the attorneys in the Commonwealth's office working to keep Henrico County safe. And one thing I want to stress is that is not at odds with me being a defense attorney, right? If any one of us does not have access to due process, none of us have access to due process. And that is something that I think Miriam can echo as well when we're talking about representing folks with ICE. And there is something that is a little controversial that is something to think about. And I hope you think about this as you wonder sometimes why we have a system that is so intent on protecting due process rights, why we have a system that guarantees right to counsel, why we have a system that sets all of these rules in place, why you have a right to remain silent, why you can challenge evidence presented against you. And it's called Blackstone's rule, I believe it is. And it says it is better for 10 guilty men to go free than one innocent person to suffer, be incarcerated, or what have you, right? And that is a provocative statement for a lot of people. When you think about it, 10 guilty people going free, one innocent person being detained, arrested, accused, right? I submit to you that the importance with which you place that depends a lot on how much you think you are likely to be this one person, right? If you don't think there's a whole lot of risk to you not having your due process rights protected, if you don't think there's a whole lot of risk to you being falsely accused of something, you don't really sympathize with this side over here. You care more about, the 10 guilty people going free. I would submit to you that we all need to be of a frame of mind that we are this one person, right? And we have a responsibility to look out for each other, to make sure that all of our rights are protected, to make sure that we all know how important due process is for everybody. And I share that only because there are some people that will say, why do we do so much to protect people that are accused of crimes? Why do we have a presumption beyond a reasonable doubt of having to prove that if somebody is guilty when we've got a lot of evidence against them? And we have to be a society where we recognize that the person who has the least amount of rights protected represents all of us, because there, but for the grace of God, go I. So I will close that for now. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I am going to set myself a little clock so I don't run over. I've learned. You give, a bunch of people microphones, and we're all extroverts probably, so we'll be here all night. So I'm an immigration lawyer. I've been working in immigration law for 20 years. I've been practicing in this area for 17, and in the last 10 months, I've had a very unique experience of the entire country, for many people for the first time, paying attention to, hearing about, asking questions about, having an opinion in the work that I do and the community that I serve. And I'm so happy to be here today because I'm really passionate about sharing information, dispelling myths, and answering questions about the immigration and immigration law. I'd like to start with a couple questions, and you can show me raise of hands. Before January of 2025, who really thought a whole lot about ICE? Okay. In the past 10 months, who's been thinking about ICE? So ICE stands for Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Immigration is a civil area of law, and there's a huge government agency, the Department of Homeland Security, that has a variety of different sub-agencies that deal with all different types of immigration law. And ICE is the enforcement side. They're like the police officers for immigration. Immigration is civil law. And so being here in the country without immigration status is not a crime. I know if you watch the news, you would have a very different understanding of that. But it's not a crime, it's a civil infraction. I like to compare it to if you built a shed in your backyard without getting the permit. I don't want to admit to anything here, but when my husband and I were building our house out in Goochland, we had a couple visits from the building inspector. And what happens when you commit a civil infraction? Maybe nobody finds out, maybe somebody comes by and yells at you and tells you to fix it, right? That's what's supposed to happen under our law if somebody doesn't have immigration status. Crossing the border without a visa is a misdemeanor. Now, by a show of hands, do we typically see police in masks smashing car windows, yanking people out of their cars, and throwing them in the back of the van because they're suspected of committing a misdemeanor? Thankfully, no. Unfortunately, we are seeing that with immigration these days. Can anybody guess how many immigrants are in Virginia, roughly? You can just throw out a number. Don't be shy. 100,000. Okay. 1 million. There are 1 million immigrants living in Virginia. About half of those have gone through naturalization, half of those have not. Of the remaining half, there's all different types of immigration statuses that people can have. You could have a visa, you could have a work permit, you could have asylum, you could have permanent residency. Contrary to what you might think if you've seen the news in the past year, a very small percentage of immigrants in the US are undocumented, or as some people like to call it, illegal. But as we just covered, that's not really an accurate term because it's not a crime. Of those families, many of them are what we call mixed status families, where maybe one spouse is a citizen and one spouse is not. Immigration law is very complicated. And until recently, most Americans didn't really pay a lot of attention to it. There's a lot of misconceptions, like if you come here and marry a citizen, you automatically become a citizen. Or you come here on a visa, you file some paperwork, and then you get your green card. I have clients that I've been representing for almost 2 decades who are still trying to get their citizenship. It's very complicated. And people that are going through that process can have different types of immigration status. Up until recently, those people were really not at risk because for the most part, historically, if people were going through the immigration process, they were generally safe from enforcement. Kind of common sense, right? Like, why would you arrest, detain, and deport somebody that was about to get their immigration status? That's all changed. And the reason that it's changed is because even though immigration law is covered by federal statute, the implementation of immigration law can often be done by executive order. And so even though the laws haven't changed, the way that they're enforced, applied, and interpreted have changed. So a couple more questions. Who thinks that the US Constitution applies only to citizens? Smart crowd. With just a few exceptions, like who can vote and who can become president, the US Constitution applies to all persons, not all citizens. So things like the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment apply to everybody regardless of their immigration status. So because we're here today to talk about some rights, I'm going to just spend a moment on this because I think there's a more important topic to talk about because of what we're seeing in our own community. But if a constitutional right applies to a US citizen, it pretty much applies to an immigrant, whether they're an immigrant with residency, with a visa, or an undocumented immigrant. You don't need to answer any questions, including questions about your citizenship status. You can refuse to consent to a search. You can refuse to answer your door when ICE is knocking on it. You really don't need to cooperate with ICE at all. What you can't do is you can't obstruct ICE. So whether you're a citizen or non-citizen, you can't cause any problems with them. You can't interfere with them. You can't lie, and you can't present false documents. But that's pretty much it. Nobody is required to cooperate beyond that. If you're not a US citizen, you're supposed to carry proof of your status, but you still have the same Fifth Amendment privilege not to show it. Now, Misty preempted one of the points that I wanted to make, which was, in addition to immigration law, I practiced criminal law for many years. And in talking with people, I often gave the same advice. You don't raise your constitutional rights at the side of the road. You raise your constitutional rights in court. And I can tell you right now that the federal courts are having no problem interpreting the Constitution. So who can ICE detain? Well, ICE there's 2 different things. They can detain people and they can arrest people. If you're watching any of the social media videos that are going viral, it's not really clear which is which, but legally there is supposed to be a distinction. ICE can detain people if they have a warrant or if they have reasonable suspicion that that person is in the country without immigration status. That allows them to detain somebody for questioning. Now, if ICE was just walking down the street and saw somebody, how would they have reasonable suspicion that somebody didn't have immigration status? Yeah. Well, we have a pretty bad temporary order that was recently entered by the US Supreme Court, where the US Supreme Court gave some examples of ways that ICE might have reasonable suspicion, like how somebody looks, how they talk, whether they have an accent, what kind of job they have, like if they're a landscaper or if they're in Home Depot. That doesn't really sound right, does it? Okay. So we're going to have to see what happens with that, but some people are calling that racial profiling. Now, the next step is when can ICE arrest somebody? In order to arrest somebody, there's a higher standard. They have to either have a warrant for arrest which they usually don't. Or they have to have probable cause to believe that somebody doesn't have immigration status. And oftentimes, how they get from reasonable suspicion to probable cause, anybody have a guess? By people talking. Yeah, by people telling them they don't have immigration status. So if you have anybody in your community, in your life, any friends, neighbors, many non-citizens don't realize that they have the same constitutional rights as citizens. As Americans, it's often kind of baked in. We grow up hearing these rights. So what happens after somebody is arrested by ICE? Where do they go? ICE has detention facilities, that's right. It's a little tricky because immigration law is federal, and most detention centers are private. And so, in contrast, if somebody is charged with a crime in Henrico and they're arrested in Henrico, they're going to go to Henrico jail. They're going to have a court appearance in Henrico court. Their families are going to know they're here in Henrico. They can call them, they can visit them, they can hire them a lawyer in Henrico. The lawyer knows where to file paperwork, where to file a bond motion. It's a little bit dicier with immigration law because somebody can be arrested by ICE in Virginia and they could be moved to Louisiana or they could be moved to Pennsylvania. And so that makes it kind of hard to hire a lawyer. It makes it hard for the lawyer to know where to file a bond motion. And sometimes it makes it impossible for the family to even find them. When someone's arrested by ICE, there's one of two things that usually happens. Some people can be deported straight away. That's if they have been deported before in the past, or if they have serious criminal convictions, or if they've been in the country for less than 2 years. That doesn't apply to most people, because just statistically, that represents a small percentage. Most people are going to be put into removal proceedings, and so which means they're going to go in front of an immigration judge, and there's a completely separate immigration court system where the Department of Homeland Security acts as the prosecutor. They try to deport the person. The person has a right to hire a lawyer, but there's no public defenders, and so you either represent yourself or you have money to hire a lawyer, and then the immigration judge decides what happens to them. So in a nutshell, that's kind of an overview of what happens with immigration and what happens with ICE enforcement. But I've gotten a lot of questions over the past few months about, like, what can we do as a community? Before the past 10 months, many of us might not have really thought about it on a day-to-day basis. We might not have thought, is an ICE officer ever going to come to my workplace or to my home? There might be people in your lives that are in jeopardy now that, it just never crossed your mind before. Maybe a family member, a close friend, a coworker, an employee, a neighbor. There's a few things that all of us in the community can do. And one of the most important ones is why you're all here tonight, to be aware, to know what's going on, to know your rights, to know other people's rights. Non-citizens can be connected with an attorney now and not wait until they're detained. We can look after our neighbors. If you have someone in your life who's not a citizen, you can exchange contact information. Many of our clients are making plans of what will happen with their kids if they're detained, who will pick their kids up from school. Many of our clients are preparing powers of attorney for who can look after their house or their business or their car if they're detained. You can show support. And if you do see any ICE interaction, it can be very scary. ICE agents don't operate the way that we've all come to expect and respect in police officers. They often don't have uniforms. By practice, the current practice for ICE right now is not to identify themselves. They often wear face masks or balaclavas or street clothes or hoodies. They can be very aggressive. I've personally witnessed this myself. They often drive vehicles that don't say law enforcement or don't say ICE. They often hide in places around buildings and just grab people. If you see any of this, it's 100% legal to film it. And this has actually been an effective strategy in some cities that have seen increased enforcement, because a video is what it is. It's not a he said, she said. When we have a video, we know what's going on. We can track it. There are many cases going through the court system right now, challenging constitutional rights violations and challenging abuses. And so that, in sum, is what we can all do as community members to know our rights and also to help our fellow community members protect and enforce their rights. As Misty so eloquently said, if some of us don't have due process, none of us have due process. So thank you so much for including me in this event. I'd be more than happy to speak afterwards if anybody has questions about immigration.
You take your time. Ms. Taylor, if you find the answer good.
Okay, here we go, testing. Yes, there we are. Okay, well, good evening, everyone. Good evening. I just want to thank everyone for having me here this evening, for allowing me to speak on such an important topic of voting rights here in Virginia. So let's see. So voting rights have been, they have been the cornerstone of Black freedom in this great country, the United States of America that we live in, and it has been a central pillar of the NAACP's advocacy for over a century. And while Virginia, we've made some strides, we've come a very long way, but there is still a very long way for us to go. Unfortunately, I think we are all aware we are always just one election away from having the progress that we fought and won rolled back. So with that being said, that is why the fight continues for us to have the right to vote. And just a brief, history, because we don't know where we're going till we know where we've been. But from the very beginning, from Reconstruction all the way through Jim Crow, Virginia used poll taxes and literacy tests and, countless other barriers to intentionally suppress the Black vote. And in spite of protections that were put in place back in the 60s, from the 24th Amendment in 1964 that outlawed the poll tax, to the Voting Rights Act of 1965 that banned literacy tests and other discriminatory practices, in spite of those things being put into effect back in the 60s, Virginia has remained one of the most difficult states to vote in. So as recently as 2028, we were ranked number 48 out of 50 states on the list of states where it was easy to vote. So we were way down. We were almost at the bottom. We were number 48. So that was back in 2018. But I am proud to report that we are now number 12 on the list. Okay, amen, amen. Yes, that is worth a hand clap. Yes. And these changes, they were hard fought and they were won. And all of these changes really were instituted by the legislature in 2020. So I'm here representing NAACP, and we are a nonpartisan organization. So there's no talk of Democrats or Republicans, but if everyone thinks back, you will know who was in power in our state legislature back in 2020. And they made it their mission to ensure that they opened the ballot box and that they made it easier for everyone to have the right to vote here in Virginia. And just some of the updates and changes that they made. Honestly, they're really kind of common sense, but one of the biggest things was that they implemented the no excuse absentee ballot voting process. So pre-COVID, pre-2020, if you wanted to request an absentee ballot, you actually had to have a reason. There was a list that the state had, and it had to be an approved reason that was on that list. So, if you had a surgery scheduled, or if you were going to be traveling, or, if you had a disability, things of that nature, then they would issue you the absentee ballot. But, if there was something else, too bad, so sad. If you weren't able to show up up on election day, then you just weren't able to vote. So now, in 2020, our legislature passed it so that now there's no excuse absentee voting. So you don't have to have a reason, you don't have to have an excuse. All you have to do is request that an absentee ballot be sent to you, and you're able to do it. They also made it so that the requirements, like the paperwork that goes along with the absentee voting, is now less stringent. So previously, you had to have a witness, someone there to, watch you sign and verify that it was you signing. So now that's actually been done away with. So the process now, when you receive your absentee ballot, you get the ballot, and then you get an envelope, and then you put the ballot in the first envelope, and then you put that envelope in the second envelope, and then that's what you mail. Either you mail it in or you drop it off at a drop box. So now, in lieu of having someone there to witness you, the way that you verify your identity is on that first envelope, you put your date of birth and the last four of your social. And so I know that's something we've been really trying to get the word out about, because there are people that are like, oh, I don't want to put my social on the envelope. People are concerned about that. But that first envelope is going into the larger envelope that is mailed to the registrar. Then when the registrar receives it, they are the ones that open it, and they're the ones that see that inner envelope that has the information. And they actually already have your full Social Security number and your date of birth, because you put that on the application when you filed for it. So, they already have the info, and they're just cross-referencing to make sure that it's really you. So that was a good change. They also implemented, now we have a permanent absentee voter list. So, if you know that, you're not going to be able to make it, to the polls or, to go out to vote, now you can just check the box to opt in to be on the permanent absentee voter list. And so once you do that, moving forward, the Board of Elections will just automatically send you your ballot every year. So you don't have to, go through the process of requesting it. So that was a great update. They also instituted the 45 days of early voting. So I'm sure everyone is aware of that. So now this year, Election Day was on November the 4th, and early voting actually started on September the 19th. So that's been a game changer. It allows people the flexibility to, go and vote on their own time. And what I can say, and what I've seen just in my own work with the NAACP and other organizations, we've actually had a huge decrease in people needing rides to the polls. At one point that was a big thing, the church vans, everybody was ready, and we were ready to take people on election day, but now we've got people standing around waiting to get a call to drive people. And I think a big part of that is attributed to now people can, go when it's convenient for them. Another change that was instituted was now there are more secure ballot drop boxes all around the county, just to make it easier for people to submit their absentee ballots. They greatly expanded curbside voting, so now that is a requirement. And I'm sure you've noticed, if you voted in Henrico, in the city, everywhere, now when you show up, they've got the cones outside, they've got signage, to let you know that you do not have to exit the car. So if you're elderly or having some type of medical issue happening, really doesn't have to do anything with age. Just if you're unable to get out of the car, you are more than welcome to drive up to curbside voting, and they'll take care of you. So those reforms, they really, they work the number of absentee ballots skyrocketed. So just for context, in 2019, there were approximately 144,000 absentee ballots that were submitted. In 2020, there were 2.68 million ballots that were submitted. And I know that was COVID, though, and it was a presidential election. So, the numbers, even though we should vote every time, that number should be the same. It kind of fluctuates. But in our last presidential election of 2024, we had 2.34 million people that opted to go the absentee route. So clearly it's working, and people are taking advantage of it. Let's see, another update that has been made is, the legislature focused to make it easier for young people to get registered to vote. So now we've got the pre-registration, where 16 and 17-year-olds can pre-register to vote. They can either, fill out the regular voter registration form, or when they're at DMV and they're applying for their license or their learner's permit, it's a little box on there that they can check to say, yes, they want to register to vote. So when that box is checked, DMV then sends their information over to the registrar who holds it. And then once they turn 18, they are moved over to the voting rolls. So it's kind of like a set it and forget it. You know, a lot of them don't even realize that they've checked the box, and then, you know, they get their their card, you know, once they turn 18. It gives them their precinct information and so forth. So that was a help. Another, way that the legislature sought to protect the vote here in Virginia was they passed the Virginia Voting Rights Act in 2021. And I know it's like, well, we already have a Voting Rights Act. They did that way back in 1965, but, you know, the devil is busy. And so there have been lots of different Supreme Court cases, you know, I tell you, they've been they've been chipping away at that thing. So with that being said, the Voting Rights Act of today is not the one that we had back in 1965. So our legislature, having the wherewithal and the forethought, they wanted to make sure that we would not be in jeopardy of losing our rights and of us having to, you know, be subject to practices that could potentially be discriminatory in our voting processes. So that's why they enacted the Virginia Voting Rights Act. So that was great. But the biggest, okay, so I saved the biggest one, the best one for last. All right, but the biggest change that occurred was when they passed the act that now allows same-day voter registration. So that is amazing. I'm going to clap for it. I know I'm about to explain it, but let me tell you, it's amazing. It's so awesome that we have this now. So, okay, so pre-COVID, essentially the rule was that you had to register to vote within 3 weeks of Election Day. And essentially that just gave the registrar time to verify your eligibility and then to add you to the roll so that you could vote using a regular ballot that would be counted immediately. But the thing with that is that if you missed that deadline, too bad, so sad, you had to wait until next year. So think about if you had recently moved into the area, or a college student that wanted to register where they were, or someone that recently, like, oh my God, it's my birthday, all right, I can vote. No, if your birthday fell within the 3 weeks before the election and you hadn't already registered, you had to wait another year. So what this law, the passage of the Same-Day Voter Registration Act, what it did was we still have that requirement where you have to, when this was passed in 2022, you still had to register within 3 weeks of the election for you to cast a regular ballot. But if you registered on day 20 all the way down to Election Day, you still fill out the form, but you're going to cast a provisional ballot. And essentially it's the same ballot, but it's just set to the side so that they can verify your eligibility. And then once that's done, then it's counted. And when we say, well, eligibility, well, what does that mean? And, you know, it's nothing sinister. Literally, it's just the same things that they verify when we all register to vote. So they want to make sure you're a U.S. citizen. They want to make sure you live in Virginia and the precinct that you're trying to vote in, that you're at least 18 on the day of Election Day, that you're not currently disqualified from voting due to a felony conviction without having your rights restored. And they want to also make sure that you're not registered or voting in another locality. Because I don't know, there were folk that said, this is happening everywhere. And I don't know, we investigated, we didn't find that to be happening. So I think that means our processes have been working. But so yeah, that's what they're verifying. And so far as documentation, when you go to register to vote, you fill out the form, and then you've got, you fill out the form, and you provide them with the, except with ID, and then at that point they will take your ballot, they give you the provisional ballot that you vote on, and then they set it to the side. So I just wanted to touch on ID requirements too, because that's something where sometimes there's some confusion with that. So in Virginia has a long list of acceptable IDs. So we all know your driver's license is acceptable, or your DMV issued ID, that's also acceptable. But fun fact, it could be current or expired. So let's just say you hadn't made it down to the DMV to get the new one. If someone tries to turn you away and say, this ID is expired, we can't use it, you let them know, actually, I can. So that's on there, all right. All right. So, and then, but in addition to that, you can use a valid your employer ID with a picture that's issued by, it could be a private or a public employer. If you work for the government, you can use your federal government ID or your Virginia government ID. The caveat with the expiration is it just can't be expired greater than 12 months. You could also use a military ID, your passport, or nursing home resident ID. For students, they can use their high school ID from either public or private. Obviously, it's going to be a Virginia high school since they live here, and that too can't be expired greater than 12 months. They could also use their voter ID card that's issued by the Department of Elections when they vote. I know some people carry it in their wallet. You could use a utility bill, you could use a bank statement, you could use a government check, a paycheck, or any other government document, as long as it has your name and address, and it has to be within 12 months. So, if you roll up to the polls in November, you can, give them an electric bill from, we'll just say August, okay? But, we've got 12 months to do that. Another fun fact about this documentation that makes it easy is that you can have the physical document, the bank statement, the utility bill, or you can show them an electronic copy. So in today's world, now with our cell phones, even if for whatever reason, if you don't have ID, if you're able to pull up one of those items online, they have to accept that. So again, our legislature really did go above and beyond to make it easy for us. And so yeah, and with that being said, we take 2 steps forward, and there are always people try to make us take 3 steps back. So even with all these great changes back just in 2025, there was legislation put forth that wanted to shorten our early voting window. There was legislation that was put forth that said, hey, we need to tighten up those ID requirements. I'm sure y'all saw that on the news. That was national too. But those things were submitted, but they got blocked. So none of that passed. So we still are where we are. And again, it's just a testament to elections have consequences. And it's important that we vote for people that are going to institute laws that support us, that are in our best interest. And we all know opening up the access to the ballot, the more people that vote, it's typically better for us. It's when they try to pigeonhole and make it so small that nobody can vote. That's when other folk win. So those are the changes that have been implemented. Also just wanted to touch on, so just again, with us taking 2 steps forward and them trying to bring us 3 steps back, and the importance of us remaining vigilant. Back in 2024, there was a campaign by the current governor where they wanted to clean up the voting rolls. We want to, there are dead people on the rolls. We need to make sure, And then come to find out, the governor said, oh yeah, actually a couple of hundred people were accidentally removed from the rolls. But then when we looked into it, it was 3,400 people that were accidentally removed from the rolls. So we had that, and then there was another case at the same time where they were trying to purge non-U.S. citizens from the rolls by using data from the DMV. And so again, it's important, that's where the advocacy organizations like the NAACP, ACLU, because they stepped in and said, you're violating civil rights here, and they sued and they won. So a lot of those people that were impacted were added back to the roll. So it's just, again, important that we remain vigilant. And, like I said, we are always just one vote, we're one election away from losing the rights that we've gained. And so I just want to just briefly touch on, so that's what's changed, and I want to touch on what we are advocating for right now, the big change that we are looking for in 2026. All right, so that is, we are looking to end felony disenfranchisement in Virginia. And so, okay, right? Okay, yeah, okay, I'm going to explain. I'm so excited because it is happening. It's happening. All right. So Virginia is one of the few states where the governor alone is the person that decides whether or not a person regains their civil rights. And that includes their right to vote after a felony conviction. So, and just to give context to that, so it's like, you've served your time, you've gotten out, but you don't just automatically get the rights back. You got to fill out a form, restoration of rights form. You got to send it in to the governor, and then they make the choice. So again, elections have consequences, just giving us context over the past 3 governor administrations. We had the McAuliffe administration, they left in 2018, and when they left, they had restored the rights to nearly 173,000 people. Governor Northam, after him, in 2022, when he left, he had restored the rights to nearly 69,000 people. Our current governor, Governor Youngkin, he's been in since 22, and his time is coming quickly to an end. Can anybody guess how many people restoration of rights applications he's approved? I know, right? 3,500. Okay, 3,500 since 2022, right? So just that, clearly, that is insane, and that's the problem. There is no criteria, there's no transparency, there's no accountability. Literally, it's just the governor saying, all right, yeah, I'll sign off. I'll do it tomorrow. So, that is why the NAACP, we are currently, well, first of all, we are in the midst of suing the Youngkin administration over that and his lack of processing those applications, which hopefully will be moot soon. But, and we're also fighting for a constitutional amendment that will automatically restore rights upon their release. So just to give a little bit of context on that, in Virginia, if we want to do a constitutional amendment, it has to be approved by a majority in the legislature in 2 separate sessions. And there has to be an election in between, right? Because delegates are voted in every 2 years, and senators are voted in every 4 years. So if you do it back to back, it could just be the same people voting for the same thing. So since amending our Constitution is big, they want to make sure that it's fair. So the bill that was introduced, it passed in 2025 session, where we were asking for a constitutional amendment to automatically restore rights. It passed in 2025. We just had the election, so now in 2026, it's going to go through again. And I think, I would like to be humble and say, well, maybe we'll see, but I think we all know what's going to happen. From who got elected and what our legislature is looking like, it's pretty favorable that may go through. So yes, so that would be amazing. So once that goes through, then it goes to the voters, because again, it's all of us. So once it passes, it'll be on the ballot in November for us to vote on. So that's just something to look forward to. And so yeah, and I just want to say, so again, even though Virginia, we've made great strides, we've gone from number 48 on the list all the way up to number 12, the fight still continues because they are constantly trying to pull us back. So we have to be vigilant. And again, elections have consequences, so we got to make sure that we are putting people in that have our best interests at heart. Because, let me see, okay, here we go. When we organize, we rise. But when we vote, we win.
Well, good evening, Mount Olive Baptist. How's everybody this evening? I want to say thank you to Mr. Cuff. I want to say thank you particularly to Pastor Thompson, who's always been very gracious with letting us be here. And for those who do not know me, I am Shannon Taylor. I am the Commonwealth's Attorney for Henrico County. I have been your elected prosecutor since 2012. But before that, I had done some defense work, and before that, I was a prosecutor in the city of Richmond. So it's hard to believe that March of next year, I'll be practicing law for 30 years, where the chief was just a mere pup in the Richmond Police Department, where we started off together. And so, a lot has been said here this evening, and I want to make sure that I'm not going to duplicate a lot of stuff, because I definitely want to be mindful of the time and want to get to the really important part, which is to hear your questions. So, when Mr. Koff was putting this together and working with the great people from my office that are here, Taylor and Zakar and Corey, and wanted to try to be part of this, and the idea of what the Commonwealth Attorney is responsible for when it comes to understanding people's, what people know about their rights, where they are in this process regarding the criminal system. We are tasked with being responsible for a lot of things, because not only are we supposed to be responsible to the individuals who have been harmed by somebody else's actions, people that we call the victims or the witnesses who have seen something that happened, and we're relying on their cooperation to put together a case. But we're also responsible for the people who've been charged to make sure that that very important document that we've been talking about, the Constitution, is being protected. And of course, we talk a lot about the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, the Sixth Amendment, which of course both Miriam and Misty have been talking about, which is, keeping your body, yourself, your property free from that unnecessary, unlawful infringement by law enforcement, whether it's to make sure that you have the right to due process. That means you should know exactly what the police are saying and the prosecutor is saying that you're doing, that we're supposed to tell you how we're going to prove that case, and most importantly, if there's any type of favorable evidence that we find during the course of the investigation, we must provide that. So whether it's favorable in whether or not you did or did not do the crime, or favorable in your level of culpability, if you were, the mastermind, or you just happen to be somebody just sitting on the sidelines, we are constitutionally required to turn that over, and you should not have to ask for that. When we're talking about having the right to a jury, that again is something that people who come through the system, it is their choice, it is their right, if they choose to be judged by 12 people, their peers, quote unquote, or by the one person who's there in the black robe, the judge. And there was recent change in the law that allowed that once you got past that first phase of whether or not you were found guilty or not guilty of the offense, then who was going to be, the judge about what the result should be? And we allowed people, the law changed to say, I'm going to take 12 people to say, because I need all 12 of them to agree that I did this, and then, but I think I'm going to go with that one person, the judge, because he's going to have access to stuff that 12 lay people, 12 citizens won't have access to. And I might be able to make a more comprehensive argument to the judge if it's just that one person. And of course, the idea being that when all of that is said and done, whether or not you have that access to, to counsel that Misty talked about, right there at that initial process of when police are asking you questions and the circumstances they're asking you, and then again, whether or not you have that counsel at the time you start you going through the court process. And one of the things that we all talk about is that right to counsel, and whether or not that's counsel that you have access to. Are you fortunate enough to be able to retain a lawyer? Are you somebody who is going to be waiting to get a hold of a court-appointed lawyer and finding out when you might actually be able to get in touch with that lawyer? And some of these kind of, the real life things where the Constitution is a document that's four corners, the reality of life sometimes comes in and impacts how that document is interpreted. So we are talking about, victims' rights. They have rights too. The people who are harmed by others, they have the right to be told about when someone gets charged, when that person gets charged, and when that person's coming to court. They have the right to be there in court. And probably the most important aspect is when a case is being negotiated, the victim has a right to say, what they want to say about if they agree or disagree with the plea negotiations. Now, I will say as a little footnote, that doesn't mean necessarily what they want is what's going to happen, but they have the absolute right that is in the law of Virginia to be able to express that. And it needs to be shared with the prosecutor. And if we don't do that, that's not good. Now, I say all of that because this is in the realm of, the criminal court system. There are things, of course, that are just as important in the civil system. And I will tell you all here today that there are a lot of people that have rights in the civil side of the world that you'll never even know about. And there are things like with landlord-tenant, when we're talking about a housing crisis, when we're talking about our children in school and dealing with the struggles that some of our kids are having and whether or not we feel like the schools are being able to provide our child with that free and appropriate education, there are so many really technical things on the civil side of the law that really should require a court-appointed or free access to an attorney that we haven't figured out as a nation how to make that happen. So I will, I know we're talking a lot about the criminal part. The reason why I wanted to go last is because I want to also highlight something that everyone has already talked about. Like I made a joke about the chief, and it's true. We go back a very long way. And like I said, with the exception of 3.5 years of being a defense attorney, which, by the way, I did love that. I loved that job. It's all been prosecuting. So the relationship we have with law enforcement is critical to be able to work together, to put evidence, to make a cohesive argument. But we are not the attorneys for the police. So that's what the public needs to know, is that while the chief and I, it's important that we can work together to be able to put together policies for the safety of the community, he's supposed to be able to call me up when he thinks someone in my office has done wrong, and I'm supposed to be able to call him up when I think something has been done improperly by one of his officers. And that's the way the system is supposed to work, right? That checks and balances. And so that was, when we talk about technology, I know we didn't get into the weeds about that, but that's one of the things that we talk about when you hear about what your rights are, your rights to privacy. That's why those flock cameras are out there, and I'm gonna tell you right now, I love them. And I know we talk about driving on the street and whether or not there's an expectation of privacy when I'm driving down, Broad Street. But the fact of the matter remains is, while you may feel like, why do they know where I'm going at 2:57 on Wednesday afternoon when I'm driving down Broad Street? I will tell you that the way we balance that scale and what we are able to achieve to be able to find somebody who took somebody's loved one from them by violence, I'm okay with it. That's important when you talk about what we're doing, we're working with the police. And what Ms. Miriam was talking about with immigration, when we talk about people who are being questioned about whether or not they're here lawfully in the United States, from our perspective, first and foremost, we follow the law, right? But it's a broken system, right? We do know that the system of immigration does not work, and the due process that is being afforded, as Miriam told you, is not being respected. But from the standpoint of being the prosecutor, if someone here has been, again, the victim of a crime, and the individual, the next thing I know, they're in the jail, and they're going to get bond, and the next thing you know, they're like, well, Ms. Taylor, Mr. Jones can't come out here because ICE picked him out. We're like, what? So I have zero control over that. Maybe there's some people that shouldn't be, here because they've done something really, really violent. But on the other hand, I'm also thinking about victims who are like, they deserve to have their day in court and to be able to have somebody held accountable for their actions. So what is going on in Miriam's world regarding immigration definitely has this weird, overlap with what we do day to day in the Commonwealth Attorney's Office and in the public safety sector. It's funny, we talked about Deanna, I wanted her to go, before me too, because while everyone thinks the Commonwealth Attorney just does criminal work, we follow, the law of Virginia, the code of Virginia, and then what courts say about the interpretation of the law. And there is literally like 150 things in the code that is put on the shoulders of the Commonwealth Attorney's Office. And doing voting protections is part of that. One of the things that everyone here should know is that in 2016, before Chief English got here, when we knew that we were dealing with that first election with Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, and everybody started to get a little crazy, we started doing what these things called tabletop exercises. And we had all of the public safety people in there, including Mr. Coakley, who is the registrar for Henrico County, and we thought about every type of scenario we could possibly think of to make sure that when you went to the voting precinct, where you were going to cast your vote, that you could do it free from any interference, free from any threat or any intrusion from people. And so we had that all set up, and things in Henrico County went smoothly in 2016, and they've done it thereafter. And we got it ready for COVID, which was another unique set of circumstances in 2020. We did it again here in 2024, and we will continue to do that. So that was, I'm really glad she talked about that. And I'll tell you the last thing about that was we were the ones that found out, because you've got great people in Henrico County. Is anybody else who's not in Henrico County who's here? Like Chesterfield or City? Okay, I'm sorry. And I say that because in Henrico County, we had a very comprehensive group, and thank you, unions, for being here. We had a very comprehensive group, whether it be with our Henrico Democratic Committee, and Republicans have their committee too. But that was when Deanna's talking about people coming to the poll to cast their vote, and all of a sudden they were told that they couldn't cast their vote. We were right there during that early voting in 2024 when a young lady said, I have my document with me. I got Terry McCullough's signature on this piece of paper, or Ralph Northam's signature. I've got my right to vote back. They're saying I can't do it. They're calling me, Shannon, what's going on? I'm like, I don't know, let's find out. And that's when they uncovered, and that's where the NAACP sued the Youngkin administration, because they found out that they were taking people off the roll, because as some people may know, if you have a felony conviction, you can be placed on probation. And sometimes they would say, well, if you're not following the rules of probation, we're going to give you a violation of probation. Well, guess what they were doing under the Youngkin administration? They said, you got a violation. They were kicking you off. And it took a minute for us to realize what was going on, and to get somebody who had any common sense in the Attorney General's office to be like, you've been letting people off for months. Put them back on. And that was the first fight, Deanna, that we all were successful in doing. So I just wanted to say, because again, Mr. Cuff, I wanted to be able to leave some time for some question, that all your rights, that this type of formatting to constantly know what's going on, the idea of when to pick those battles and where to take those battles in the courtroom, and finding out if you can have an advocate be there for you, is really a constantly changing issue dealing on facts and reality. But I am really, really excited to see everybody here in this wonderfully packed room here this evening to learn about that, and I look forward to the questions that you're going to be posing afterwards, so thank you.
All right. First of all, thank you guys so much. That was awesome. Very, very informative. And as I was sitting there, it popped into my head, I think it's 2 Timothy. God does not give us the spirit of fear. So it's a blessing that they're here, and we see that they are willing to work with us. They're approachable, and we should have a collaborative approach to law enforcement, and they've proven that here for us this evening. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a couple deacons that are going to be in the aisles. We're going to go to the question and Q&A portion, and we would ask for you to, Deacon, we ask for you to raise your hand. They'll come to you, and with questions and answers. All right, Ray, we're going to get you. And again, be mindful. We're on holy ground. We're going to be good. Okay? Ray Beasley?
Jerry, first I want to say thank you to Mount Olive for this amazing opportunity for us to be educated and create strategies for our families. I don't have as much a question as a comment. I just want to go back to something that was said very early by the chief and by Ms. D, and that is the most important thing, of course, is knowing your rights, but as a parent, the most important thing is we want you to come home. We can figure it out. So I think we have to be mindful of how we develop a strategy to get our kids to understand, to work through the process so that we can vouch for their rights. Because the chief can only address his men in Henrico County. He can't deal with Hanover, he can't deal with Richmond, he can't deal with anybody else. Same thing for amnesty. And so we have to lean into the fact that while we know our rights, we have to understand how we educate our kids to come home safely so we can then fight for the rights.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was Ray Beasley. He was the former president of Henrico County NAACP. Thank you. Thank you, Ray. Who's next? Anyone else?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tony Edspeth, and I am a proud member of SAIU 12. I'm a citizen of the city of Richmond, retired military. I am, how many has AARP member? One of the 47,000 veterans, and the 35,000 home care workers here in Virginia, and I could go on and want me to name some more. Basin, Eastern Star, I could name so many hats that I wear. I heard some good stuff here tonight, but I also have questions about some of the stuff that was said. I am also a constitutionalist. And you don't know what that is. Did I do that? If you don't know what that is, a constitutionalist is a person who studies the Constitution and understands what the Constitution entails as far as your rights go. And so one of the things I would question is when you said that, okay, first of all, I can tell you right now that Chief Edwards, Colette McKeechin, and Sheriff Irvin, they know me, and they know I'm not to be messed with because I know my stuff. As far I am not a legal scholar. However, I took the time personally to learn the Constitution on my own. That's part of knowing your rights. You have to know your rights.
Right.
Take the time to learn them yourself. That's an integral part of self-teaching.
Awesome.
And so, Chief, I would ask you, how many of your officers can tell me what the first 5 things that the First Amendment guarantees? How many of them can tell me that?
Thank you.
Not many of them. I know I'm sorry, we're on time. But that's one of the things I wanted to ask. The second thing is, I want all of you to understand that when the Fifth Amendment, remember that the right to remain silent. That's very important because you don't want to incriminate yourself. That's very important. So I'm sorry, Chief.
Thank you.
I didn't know I was on this.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening.
Your microphone. There you go. Okay, you're good.
Thank the panelists, because I think we definitely need to be informed about our rights. A lot of us don't understand what we have the right to do. I feel like I've had every opportunity to understand. I'm a 31-year veteran. I worked the elections, and just recently, as last week, I completed a graduation from a senior police academy, and I received my diploma from the chief and some of his. I say that to say I got a lot of experience. I got a lot of chance to see things from both sides. I was recently shot in a simulator that the police were taking me through so that I could get a chance to see what they go through when they're approaching a criminal. And I was always yelling at the TV, like, why are you yelling 50 miles from the person? And when you see how fast they can come at you, I was killed in 30 seconds. But like, we got a lot of good information about our rights, but the problem is things that come out of conflict arise when we try to exercise those rights. Just like you were saying about your son being accosted, I still don't know what to tell my son when he comes home from an Air Force base in South Carolina and there are blue lights coming on behind him. If he's a registered gun owner, how should he conduct himself? If he has the right to remain silent, then what happens when officers get aggravated about the fact that he is remaining silent? So it's not a criticism or complaining in which, just to say we still have a lot to be done so that we as citizens know how to protect ourselves no matter how many rights we have.
Thank you. First of all, my name is Ronnie Wade, and Mr. Cuff and I go back since we were
20.
20. Chief and I go back since we were 20. So this is what my thing is. I've grown up with a man in my house, my father. And I've always had fear for my kids. Mr. Cuff and I have this conversation all the time. Chief, his kids and my kids grew up together. So it was always scary for us. And now that they have made the cut, they're in their 20s, I think we're okay. But now I'm so scared for the young people that are coming up now, because I don't know what's going to happen. The world is changing. And I'm so grateful for Mr. Cuff doing this event for us, because it's a learning experience. But at the same time, the governor is a friend of mine. He's a friend of mine. Tim Kaine is a friend of mine. I got him in my phone. We all grew up, and I'm not a politician, and Mr. Cuff knows that. But at the same time, we have to be so careful, and I'm so afraid for what's happening with our young kids today. And I pray for them, and we need to have men in the house who can teach them how to do things the right way. And the women, your backbone, thank you for all that you do. But it's been a great event, thank you. And Jerry, Mr. Cuff, I call, respectfully, and the chief, we got different names for each other. But at the same time, this has been a great event, and thank y'all for coming out, and thank y'all for all the information that y'all have given us tonight. And I've had a couple of events in my life in the last 2 or 3 weeks that I'm not proud of, that I've been faced with people coming at me at events. I talked to Mr. Cuff about it, and I felt bad because I'm at a football game and somebody approaches me because they feel comfortable, and I went off. And it was an event where I had to control myself, and I still feel bad to this moment that I really want to cry because it wasn't me. But I had to do it because they crossed the line, thinking they could say what they want to say to me, and it was not right. And we all face those challenges all the time, and just keep remembering that we were brought up a certain way. Don't cross the line to get yourself in trouble. And that's what I had to remember. I had to step back, and Lord was with me. It was a young lady behind me, and she rubbed my shoulders. And she said, "Brother, I heard everything. I'm right here with you." We had this conversation the other day, and Jerry, Mr. Cuff kept saying, I know it's not you. And Chief know me. It wasn't me, so I almost stepped out. I could be in jail today because I was this close to really destroying somebody who was in front of me, who thought they had the right. And you look at me, I'm 6'5", 265, and I would have hurt somebody bad. No, I'm serious, and I felt so bad. So I just want to say, stay in the moment, keep making sure you make the right decisions, and don't put yourself out there, because I was almost there, and I'm not that dude. I've raised a family to do the things the right way. I raised my sons to do the right thing and be respectful, and I almost stepped out. This was last week at the Washington Commanders game, and I was so close. And my partner just left, William Johnson. He's the city manager of Emporia, and when he came down, I had my finger here, and he grabbed my arm, and he said, "Wade," and I had to step back, and I had to So it's difficult out here, and I understand. So please, this is a great format. Don't mean to take up your time. Thank you for everything. And if it can happen to me, it can happen to you. So thank you.
And let me say this. Let me say this about Mr. Wade. This is a guy who was an All-American basketball player, who played professional basketball, disciplined person. So, as he said, if it can happen to him, it can happen to anyone. So thank you, Ronnie, for your comments. Microphone. Your microphone.
Question. I don't know if it was in the news or something like that, but ICE was picking up like black. But they was picking that up. That was kind of scary. And I was like, you mean they're gonna pick them out the street or approach you or come to your house? So, I was talking about ICE picking up black. You know, doesn't matter what you got to be very careful about that. You know, like they were telling us today. If somebody approach you, you don't have to do this right here or do that. But be vigilant, whatever you do, and as you walk, just look around.
Thank you. We're going to go to the lady in the center first, and then we'll get to you, sir.
I just wondered, on the permit to carry, does that make you more of a target when you're stopped by the police?
Chief?
Well, to be clear now, you don't necessarily need a permit to carry. You need a permit to carry concealed. As you know, Virginia's an open carry state. We love guns in Virginia, unfortunately. But it doesn't make you more of a target. One, like we said, I mentioned before, on a traffic stop, we're able to tell whether you have a concealed weapons permit prior to the stop. That puts us a little bit more at ease knowing that, because you've had to go through a process in order to get that anyway. So, for us, it's even better. We have people that stop cars and, the car sitting on the gun sitting on the dashboard. Now we know that gun wouldn't sit on the dashboard when you were driving, but it's open now, so that's how people do. So it makes us a little bit more easier even knowing that you have a concealed weapons permit. And we're going to ask you that because, again, most of the time people that carry concealed are going to be very cooperative because they want to, like you said, they want to go home safe as well.
The gentleman on the left here, sir.
I have a twofold question. So I do have aspirations to become a gun owner. So I just wanted to know, when conducting yourself, what are some safety protocols in terms of, do I need to acknowledge that I have it? Since we are open carry state, does that matter if I say anything? Does it matter if I don't say anything? And we talk about staying inside of the law. Of course, if I'm breaking the law, it's a different situation, but just staying inside of the law, do those things harm you? And I listened to a couple of these men talk just about, especially Wade. He's talking about, so my son is 10, and he's now venturing out to that age where he likes to go hang out with friends at other friends' houses. How do I help him navigate those times if he's ever in those moments? Because I don't want to live in fear. I don't want him to live in fear. That's not even something I'm even thinking about. But I do want to make sure he's equipped mentally with the right tools and resources to kind of conduct himself in a situation if he ever finds himself in one.
So great question. I would say it doesn't hurt if you're a gun owner to let law enforcement know that you have a gun. That, I'm be honest with you, just puts us more at ease. We don't like a surprise and find a gun because again, it thinks, what was the purpose of you not telling us? Now again, that's your right. You don't have to tell us, but you know, I'm just giving you facts that makes us puts us a lot more at ease if we know that. As far as your son's concerned, I would say this, and I see a lot of folks in here that look my age or older. Parenting ain't easy.
No.
One is just you just really got to know who your son's friends are. That is the most important piece of that. And then, you know, don't hide stuff from them, because, you know, you're experienced in the world, and so you know some of the pitfalls that could really harm them. And so you just got to be honest with them. And again, I've been through situations with my kids. My kids, fortunately, they're almost 30 years old. One of my sons almost 30 now, but you know, he's dealt with some situations in his life, and like I said, the parenting ain't easy. And again, they may not always go down the path that you want them to go down. But again, you got to make sure you're being honest and open with them, and just like I said, just making sure you know who they're hanging around, and not only know who they're hanging around, but know who the parents that they're hanging around with as well. That's important.
Thank you.
And I'll just add to that, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
So we have, you know, unfortunately had some high-profile events where young, and again, I represent young people primarily, and the young people having access to guns is a serious problem here in Henrico County. And a lot of access is happening, some on the streets also, but in their homes. We at Henrico, in the Henrico County government, we give free lock boxes away. If you go to the government centers, either the Western or Eastern Government Center, I think some libraries, mental health, you can get a free gun safe to keep your firearm. So if anybody in here has a firearm, please make sure that it is locked and kept safe and away from access of your children. I mean, we've seen here in the news recently, schools, the metal detectors have caught some firearms attempting to come into to the school buildings. So I would say it is incumbent, and you speak specifically about a 10-year-old. I have an 11-year-old who's very curious, right? And it is, you have to know your kid. I know my 11-year-old well enough to know that I need to say to him, this is, you know, there are guns in this home, and my husband was former law enforcement when he was in the military. Because what I don't want is the curiosity to be, you know, to have him try to seek out the information on his own. And so hopefully we can have these age-appropriate conversations with children in our home to say, this is here, this is out of your access, and here's what we're doing to protect it. But also when they're going over to a friend's house, like we have to get over that, you know, embarrassment of calling the friends. You know, it used to be, I'm not that old, but it used to be that, you know, well, what's the mama's name? What's the phone number? Let me make sure that they know that you're coming over there, what have you. And we've gotten away from that. But saying, you know, hey, are there any firearms in your home? And you may feel silly asking it, but it's way better than the alternative of something happening because you didn't ask the question and you didn't know. So, yeah, I applaud you for asking that question and wanting to, even from the very outset, be a responsible owner. In Henrico County, we're going to help you with that.
Respectfully, we're going to take 2 more questions.
I just wanted to thank Mr. Cuff for inviting me here. And I want to thank all the movers and shakers that are up there that have taken their valuable time to come and arm us with a little bit more information than when we came here with. But my question is to the immigration attorney. I know that there's a system for a normal person to go through the court system, and if they don't have access, they have a public defender. But when a person is picked up by ICE, there's no wiggle room for like a public defender at this point, the way that's set up. And then is there, I mean, how would they even, because I thought you had said that you either have to be able to afford an attorney or you won't have an attorney. So is there any, I know they've got like a over $100 billion budget, but is there any room in that budget for someone to have like a public defender on that side?
Thank you. That's a great question. The budget is for enforcement. So there is, because the immigration court system is a civil system, the way that the Constitution requires counsel in criminal cases, that doesn't apply to civil cases. And it's really a little inconsistent, because I can tell you, somebody who is detained and being put through an adversarial proceeding to be deported, it's pretty much exactly like criminal court, and detention is exactly like jail. But they just don't have that same constitutional right of being allowed to have a public defender if they qualify. So anybody in the immigration system has the right to hire a lawyer. There are some agencies and nonprofits not affiliated with the government that provide pro bono services, but it's just so overwhelming that it's really a small fraction. And under this presidential administration, they've cut funding to nonprofits who assist immigrants. And so even the nonprofits that were able to provide those services, they've now lost their funding to do that. So really, it's you hire someone, your family hires someone, or you go it alone. And the rates of winning your immigration case or losing your immigration case, as one might imagine, are exponentially higher if someone has an attorney, because there are legal protections, and many people that are detained are eligible for immigration status. They're eligible to be here legally. But so there just is not that same application of the entitlement to an attorney. You just have the right to hire one. And I can't even fathom that there would be any improvement on that front under this administration, because in fact, quite the opposite has been happening, and funding has been taken away from the organizations, including some religious-based organizations that tried to provide that in the past. So to that point, you know, people who are not citizens, the most efficient and the most affordable way for them to try to protect themselves is to start the process before they're detained. Once they're detained and they're going through the court system, it's night and day in terms of how much time, how much effort, court hearings, travel, things like that. And it's extremely difficult for somebody without an attorney to navigate that system. It would be like representing yourself on a murder charge.
All right, I think that's going to, one more question, I apologize. Yes, sir.
Okay, yes, sir, I'll be brief. My name is Joseph Jones. I'm with the Social Justice Ministry at our your sister church, St. Peter, just up the road. I would like to commend Mr. Cuff on this and the other organizers, Pastor Thompson, on the organizing this forum, and to thank the panelists for all the good information. My question perhaps extends the framework just a little bit as pertains to voting. Can the panelists speak to how we proceed at this point towards accountability for voters? The term mandate gets thrown around quite a bit, sometimes somewhat recklessly, but I think if we look at the turnout from this past gubernatorial election here, this is, if ever there could be the case made that there was a mandate, I think that our incoming governor has that in the slate that won. And if you look even within the data that we've seen, that is, I'm looking specifically at the MOBC news polls, it looks like African Americans voted for the incoming governor to the tune of, I believe it was 93%, 96% for African American women, 89% for African American men. And so those are very high numbers. And so in terms of accountability and how we have our issues heard and acted upon, what are the next steps besides, those, of course, obviously, you're doing great work in terms of ensuring the vote. But now that we voted, how do we go about ensuring some accountability for those issues that we find important? Some of which might be specific, to our communities, and then also, of course, some that will extend beyond, our own, maybe exclusive concerns. But so the question is, what are the next steps for voter accountability? What are the mechanisms? What are the concrete, processes that we can ensure that, irrespective of party, whoever's in office, that they are listening to us, hearing us, and acting on our issues?
Yeah, good question.
Think I was going to get any questions. All right. Well, I am so happy that you asked that question. And honestly, the people, the way that we have the accountability is we, the people, have to hold them accountable. And the way that that is done is by us getting involved in being, a part of different organizations that do that accountability. So you've got, you've got your nonpartisan organizations, NAACP, that is what we do. You've also got your partisan, you've got the Democrats, they do their, work as well to hold our elected officials accountable. But really, I want to come back, but really like with the NAACP, because I didn't get to touch on that, but essentially, we do two things. We've got the activism piece and the advocacy piece. Right? So with activism, that is, we are out here, we are applying pressure, we are letting people know what's going on, we are staging rallies and demonstrations, and we are getting the word out, we are engaging with the community so that they can know what's going on. So case in point, in regards to voting, Henrico NAACP, the activism that we do is being out in the community, registering voters. When people were being kicked off the rolls, we were encouraging everyone to verify their status, to know before you go. In regards to like the pre-voter registration, we've got our education committee that is in the high schools doing those things. So that's the activism piece, but the advocacy piece, that's the work, that's the real work, that's the unsexy work, that's the late at night, you're up, you're typing emails, you feel like you're back in college as you're drafting these different things, because we actually do draft legislation. We do coalition building and everything. So like with the amendment that's going on, with them trying to pass the amendment to do the automatic restoration of rights, that has been a long labor of love. Like we are finally there, we can see the light, it's coming, but it's been work. And so far as holding, our elected officials accountable, Henrico NAACP, when there's an issue with the school board, if something happened in the schools, we are at the school board meeting. We are there, we are in formation, we have questions, and we hope that they have answers. Same thing for the Board of Supervisors. I will say, not just, but Missy, Board of Supervisors is doing a fantabulous job. We've been there, but they've been doing great, frankly. So yeah, but that is how we hold them accountable, frankly. But so for us as people in the community, I know a lot of times we feel like, oh, I don't have time. We all have lives. We all are busy, but it takes us being involved, and everybody is involved at the level at which they can be involved. Everyone's not up late writing those, different things. Honestly, I love advocacy, but I'm the activism person. I'm not up late at night writing those things. Our president, Monica Hutchinson, that is her lane. She is fabulous. She does that. I'm here for the people. I'm here to get you excited. I want you to know what's going on. I'm the activist side. So, but together, it works. So again, there is a place for everyone, no matter what it is that you want to do, but that's how the accountability is done. We have to be involved. And then also, too, you don't even have to join, an organization. Like, all of our elected officials, they do their town halls. They've got the phone numbers. You can call them. You can email. You can show up to the Board of Supervisor meetings yourself. So that's how we hold them accountable.
Thank you, Dan.
And I'm sorry. And Mr. Cuff, I'm sorry. I'm so happy you asked me that, because I did have a question. Because our sister here, she had started the question, but we didn't finish it. And I just want to go back to that, because it's like, yeah, so as we know with ICE, black people are being picked up. And I mean, we don't know, we could be regular black, we could be born here, we could be from somewhere else or what have you. And I would like to know, what's the procedure? Because in my mind, I'm going to say, get your hands off me. My ancestors built this country, but I know that when it happens, I'm going to be like, oh my God, I don't even know who to call. Do we get a phone call? Like, what is the, and also too, I don't really have any contact or any personal knowledge of people that are even in that immigration space, so I know nothing. God forbid I get picked up. I don't know what to do. So, yes.
Yes. Yes, ma'am. No, that was a great point, and I completely agree with you. So actually, the chief said something that was usually kind of the second part of something that I said that I don't think I got to, which is that along the lines of Misty's story, you know, we all have our constitutional rights, and I'm a lawyer, and I took an oath to uphold the Constitution, and that's very important to me, and it's important to know your rights. We also have to live in the real world and sometimes use common sense. And so just as the chief says, you have the right not to disclose you have a firearm, but sometimes it might be smart to do so. Similarly, if you're stopped by ICE, you have the right not to answer any questions. However, if you are a U.S. citizen, probably would be helpful to mention. And it's just kind of one of those situations where, you know, you use some common sense and advocate for yourself a little bit. There have been, to kind of confirm what you've heard, there absolutely have been U.S. citizens detained. There have been a few U.S. citizens accidentally deported. We personally at our law firm here in Henrico have had people with legal immigration status detained and attempted to be deported. So that is very real. That's not a hysterical thing that's just circulating the internet. And so what to do? If you're a U.S. citizen and you're detained, if it were me, I would say I'm a U.S. citizen. Now, how do you prove it? Most of us don't carry our passport and our birth certificate around. Sadly, many people have started doing that. You could also take a picture of it on your phone and have that on you if you don't want to carry your original documents with you. And so, you know, essentially that probably is the best practice. It's something that you're not required by the Constitution to do, but it is something that can help diffuse a situation. Nationally, there have been multiple documented reports of U.S. citizens being detained, and I can tell you that there are some lawsuits pending. I don't know that that's going to change very much because the court rulings haven't seemed to change much about ICE enforcement at this point, but that doesn't mean, just because it might feel futile, that doesn't mean that we don't continue doing the right thing, protecting ourselves, advocating for ourselves, and knowing their rights. Just if you're a U.S. citizen and you have proof of citizenship, I think it's much less likely that you would be detained. These days, I can't say that it's impossible, but most of the reports that I'm aware of have been people being detained, but then once they're able to establish their citizenship, they're not arrested. And so we talked about that distinction a little bit. And so, you know, that's probably what I would do, or what I would advise a loved one to do, is to snap a picture on your cell phone and keep it on you. Maintain your composure. You know, as many of you folks have pointed out, safety is the most important thing in that situation. A lot of these encounters can be very charged. The fact of the matter is that ICE officers do not have the same level of training and experience as law enforcement, as other law enforcement. The agency has received a huge influx of funding, and they're hiring very, very quickly. They've lowered the standards to become an ICE officer, and so you're just dealing with a different situation than you might be with an interaction with a professional local law enforcement. That, you know, we might be a little bit more accustomed to those procedures. So I think that's the best thing that we can do to try to avoid that and to try to protect ourselves. And also, again, document and share news if you witness or experience any misconduct.
All right.
Yes, ma'am. Correct.
Thank you so very much. Thank you everyone for coming out this evening, and we certainly thank our panelists for being here. We know your time is important, and we appreciate everything you've done for us. Pastor, you want to? Oh, we do have a few things that we want to give to our panelists, and thanks for their coming out and being with us this evening. Thank you very much.
Let the church say amen. Amen. Let us all stand. Let's give God a hand of praise for all of our presenters on tonight. Amen. Let us pray. Our Father and our God, we thank you for all of our presenters. We thank you for the wealth of information that has been shared tonight, God. Again, we thank you for taking the appropriate action for the information that we have received tonight. God, we thank you for traveling mercies as we go to our individuals' homes. We give you praise, honor, and glory for tonight. In Jesus' name we do pray. Amen. God bless you. Amen.